Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Book Club of California's December 21st online program, A Bookbinder's Miscellany, with Dominic Riley. We're just letting folks in from the waiting room right now, so we'll be getting started shortly. Thank you for your patience. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Book Club of California's online program for December 21st, 2020. We are just allowing participants to enter from the waiting room, so we will be getting started shortly. Thank you for your patience. Good evening, everyone. It's just a few minutes after 5 o'clock, so we're going to wait another minute or so for attendees to join us before we start our presentation for this evening. Thanks again for your patience. We'll be getting started in about a minute. Thanks. Great, I think we're going to get started. So, good evening and welcome to the Book Club of California's online program, A Bookbinder's Miscellany. This is a recorded talk by Dominic Riley. My name is Kevin Kosick, and I'm the Executive Director for the Book Club of California, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and to host this webinar. We have more than 150 people who've registered for this presentation. So for those of you who are new to us, the Book Club of California is a nonprofit, member and donor-supported organization dedicated to preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. And oftentimes we do that with a focus on the literature and history of California and the West. The book club publishes limited edition books, a scholarly journal, and keepsakes. We host a year-round series of exhibitions and programs like the one this evening on topics including fine printing, design, typography, bookbinding, collecting, and so much more. If you're not a member of the book club, or if your membership has lapsed and you're really interested in what we do, please consider joining our century-long tradition. Our membership dues are modest, but the benefits are many. And we simply cannot do the work that we do without the support of our members. So I encourage you to visit our website at bccbooks.org to join or donate to the Book Club of California. And now for tonight's speaker and our program. A Bookbinder's Miscellany, a recorded talk by Dominic Riley. One of the most renowned bookbinders working today, Dominic Riley is a restorer, design binder, teacher, writer, lecturer, and occasional filmmaker. His work consists mostly of restoration and design binding, for which he is well lauded. He won both first prizes and the Mansfield Medal in the Designer Bookbinders 2007 competition, and was elected Fellow of Designer Bookbinders in 2008. In 2013, he won first prize, the Sir Paul Getty Award, in the International Bookbinding competition. His bindings are in collections worldwide, including the British Library, the Grolier Club in New York City, and the San Francisco Public Library. He's taught master classes in the United States, Australia, Brazil, New Zealand, in Switzerland, and the Czech Republic, as well as Canada. Dominic is a past president of the Hand Bookbinders of California and is the president of the Society of Bookbinders. His bindery is in England, and he travels across the UK teaching and lecturing. He also spends part of his year in the United States, including time here in San Francisco, where he teaches at the San Francisco Center for the Book, and annually he speaks to a Book Club of California audience about bookbinding and his work. Due to the ongoing global pandemic, Dominic wasn't able to be with us in person this year for his lecture, and he's located in the UK, so doing a live online talk came with some challenges, mostly the time difference. It's something like 1 o'clock in the morning in England right now, so that just wasn't going to work. So Dominic offered to record the talk he planned to give, and we gladly accepted that offer. Tonight, we're going to be sharing his pre-recorded presentation with you. I've already watched the recording a couple of times, and I can tell you that you're in for quite a treat. You'll see some of the beautiful design bindings that Dominic has produced, and you'll hear some of the fascinating stories behind them. Because this is a pre-recorded talk, we won't have any Q&A at the end of the evening, but you are all invited to share your thoughts and comments about the presentation with one another using the chat and the Q&A function. I will share all the comments that are in the chat and the Q&A with Dominic after tonight. After the talk this evening, I'll come back on screen for a brief wrap up and a short farewell. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce to you, in a pre-recorded talk, Dominic Riley, Bookbinder.
I'll have to just imagine your oohs and ahs and cries of awe, the things I'm going to show you. Thanks, Kevin, for inviting me, and for your technical team for making it possible to send this talk over to you. I've called this a Bookbinder's Miscellany because I'm going to talk about some of my own work, but I'm going to throw in some other fun and interesting books, libraries, and other things that I've come across in the last few years on my travels and in my work as a restorer. I last spoke to the club about my own design binding in 2014, so it's been a while, and I've created quite a few books since then, and those are really the ones I'm going to show you, plus a few from earlier times that I never showed before at the book club. So I'd like to start by showing you this binding, which I did in 2009. And this is really a tribute to Marie and Carl Dern. This is called Valentine Elegies, poems by Tess Gallagher. And this is the first time I used my little adapted finishing tool that allows me, if you like, to draw into leather with gold. And these are simply taken from Carl's wonderful illustrations. And this book was the first book I did using this abstract technique, which I sold in a show in London. And it opened up tremendous creative possibilities for bookbinders, I think, to draw with gold. So it's my little contribution, if you like, to this field. That's the simple box for it, with the same idea. I can't believe now that I did all this freehand without a guide. I wouldn't do that now. I'm much more controlled. But anyway, that's the first binding. Now, I do a lot of restoration work, of course. It's the majority of what I do. And for about 10 years now, I've been doing work for the Wellcome Library in London. You know, you will know it as the great medical library on the Euston Road there. And the books I get are simply astonishing. I wish I could do a whole slideshow just about the books that I've done for them, because the titles are. So this is the first one. This is a book. It's called Anthropometamorphosis. Its other title is Man Transformed, or the Artificial Changeling. So it's an English book from 1653. You can see here from the title page that it's sort of subtitled down there as Certain Fashions of the Head, affected and contrived by the pragmatical intervention and artificial endeavors of many nations. It's a mad book. And it sort of reminds you a little bit of Gulliver's Travels, but also harks back to those medieval treaties that were written about, you know, people with dogs' heads or people with legs for arms, all this nonsense that was, you know, these strange tales that were brought back by people traveling to exotic lands. So I'm just going to share a few of them with you because they're really quite hilarious. For one, this is the people with this extended head, and it says, the first cephalic fashionmongers we read of who offered this affront unto nature were the Macrones of Pontus, so called because they had such long heads as no other nation has had the like. As soon as their newborn infants were entered into the world, they had a special care, while their heads were yet tender and soft, to press them together with their hands, and lest that should not do the feat, they bound them up with headbands and other apt instruments which prohibited the roundness of the heads. Later on in this chapter, in fact, the concluding example in this chapter of misshapen heads is this. So this is a book immediately following on from the height of the Jacobean era. So that's the hat on the left. And this leads the author to this astonishing connection here. He said, I pray, what were our sugar loaf hats so mightily affected of late by both men and women, so incommodious for use, that every puff of wind deprived us of them, requiring the employment of one hand to keep them on? Was it not the same conceit the Macrones once had, among whom they were esteemed the best gentlemen who had the highest head? Believe me, it gets more bizarre, but this is our theme. We'll keep coming back to this book. So not everything I do in my work is a bound book. And this is my contribution to a designer bookbinders group project by the fellows about 9 years ago now. And it was called the Africa Boards Project. And it was done to raise money for the Ethiopian Relief Fund. And I didn't have much time and I was feeling a little uninspired. So I thought, well, I'll just do something very literal. So I've done the outline of the continent of Africa, as you can see, but then put in some other lines to break it up a bit. And the dots represent all the national capitals of Africa, and the colors represent the flag of the African Union. So something very simple, but I think rather effective. And we've done a few of these projects now, and I love doing boards because it's the fun bit of bookbinding, not the tedious bit. This is a book I bound in about 2009 or 10, I think. And it was a commission from our dear friend, Margaret Johnson of San Francisco, of course. And this is actually the thesis binding of her grandson, Ben, who's an astrophysicist. And put simply, well, I can't put it simply. I don't know. I have no idea what Ben does, but he writes about the stars. So I thought, well, I'll have a bit of fun with this because I bet when Ben was a little boy, he had those glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling. So I've taken the 12 or 13 constellations, of course, confusing astronomy with astrology here, but that's my That's my prerogative. And I rearranged them, or arranged them into what I think is an interesting pattern. So all the lines you see, the majority of them are tooled in silver. But I have a secret weapon, which is a roll of glow-in-the-dark foil. So what I've done is on the right-hand side, the front cover, I've picked out in glow-in-the-dark, which looks almost exactly the same as the silver when you look at it. Middle there is a letter B. Moving over across, you can pick out a letter E, and going down to the bottom right, you can see a letter N. And then every place where two lines meet, I've tooled a little dot. So when you charge this up under a lamp and stand with it in a closet, and this I did for Ben, there's his name in the stars. In some ways, it was the most fun book I've ever done, and also the most difficult to show because I don't have a good photograph of it lit up. I think it would be possibly easy to organize, so I will get that done at some stage. Anyway, that was Margaret's present to her grandson, and the little circles on there, of course, represent the planets, and he actually came to visit me with some of his family, including his dad, in the Lake District, and I had saved one little German Pfennig till the end, and then said to Ben, do you consider Pluto to be a planet? And he said, absolutely. I said, well, you have the privilege of pressing the little Pfennig into the leather. So he positioned it and brought the wheel down on the press, and he finished the binding. So we love it when things like that happen. This is a very ordinary binding, I would say, or a very simple abstract binding I did for an exhibition in London. And it's called Thomas the Rhymer, from the Old Style Press, one of our great British presses. 2013, I bound this. And again, it was a question of not really having much inspiration to come up with a design that reflected the book. And so I just thought, well, look, I've got to put the book into the show. So I just did these tooled inlays and tooling straight on the book. The book is about, it's a sort of medieval folk tale, and it takes place over a 12-month. The changing of the season. So I just tooled these 12 images with their connecting dots, put it in the show. And the man that bought it said he bought it because he loved its simplicity. So I thought, well, that's good. Sometimes this really does pay off. And I'm delighted when that happens. And always delighted, of course, to sell a book. I really, really love gold tooling, and not a lot of people do it. Not as many as should. It's not difficult to learn, providing you put in the hours. But I like to emblazon things with gold, as we shall see. Now, in 2013, I won this big bookbinding competition. It was called the Sir Paul Getty Bookbinding Award, the international exhibition organized by designer bookbinders here in England. And great thrill to win that. And then shortly, a few months later, in 2014, I got a call from these people. This is Talitha, which is the Getty boat. And it's a magnificent boat, once owned by Harry Woolworth, not a large boat, about 80 meters, dating from the 30s. And there it is at sail. And here's the lovely club room. And essentially they wanted me to make a guest book for the boat, because they had one, but it was filled up. I think they've got many of them going back years. So I would like to say I was flown over, but I flew over on EasyJet to Barcelona, where it stopped. My cousin is actually the purser on this boat, which is how I got the job. And I took lots of pictures. And if you can see here in this club room, look at the bar on the right-hand side and notice the marble. This marble is everywhere. So I knew I wanted to incorporate that somehow. Look at the master bedroom, and it's got this fabulous fabric on the walls. That's presumably some aspect of it being a boat to cut down sound and so on. So I had these two ideas already, and I was going to do something about a ship, and then I thought, no, there's nothing else on this boat that looks like a ship. So I'll just do something that's going to blend in with the furniture. It's going to be quite restrained, quite masculine, quite brown, with a little gilt. And so the boat has two funnels, and so there's my binding with two funnels. It's very, very plain. And I thought that that's what they would appreciate. It's not trying to make a bold statement. It's just a thing of beauty. And that's vellum recessed into the leather, and then simple gold tooling. And there's the edge. So that's my copying, if you like, emulating the lovely marble that's everywhere on this boat. The title appears only on the box, on the spine. And that fabric I referred to in the bedroom, well, they managed to get some for me. It's printed only for the Getty family, I believe, somewhere in London. So they got me a couple of meters of that so I could make pads for the book. So this makes it a truly personal book that refers very specifically to its location. It was huge fun to do, and I didn't get to deliver it. They invited me out to Family Week to come and cruise with them, but I couldn't do it. I was at a conference, so, you know, missed opportunities. That'll never happen again. Oh, back to Man Trans 4. In this particular example, this is what it says. The Muscovites, who are for the most part of a square proportion, broad, short, and thick, have broad heads, which is in fashion with them this day. When they are tender infants and in their tender age apt to be drawn and bent to any shape, their faces are explained and flattened by art, and so directed to grow into this gentilician form. Oh, yes. Well, it's Margaret Johnson again. Margaret gave this book to me. She had a selection of unbound books from the Grabhorn that she bought in a sale. And bit by bit, she was getting people to do bindings for them. So she gave me this book. It's called San Francisco Old and New. It was printed by the Grabhorn, I think, in 1936, and it was to celebrate the building of the new bridge, not the famous bridge, but the other famous bridge, the Oakland Bay Bridge. Now, Margaret will not mind me saying this because I said it before. She said to me, I'll give you $1,000. And I thought, well, that's good. I mean, it's a little under what I would normally expect to get for a design binding, but she's a dear friend. And then she said, I'd like to do a $2,000 binding. And I said, that is a very curious commission, Margaret. What's this about? And actually what she said was very moving. She wanted to give the book, when bound, to the San Francisco Public Library as a joint gift from the both of us, as a thank you to them up on the 6th floor for all the support and encouragement and fun they have brought to us, giving us access, always with help, to the special collections and the collection of fine bindings and old bindings. So it was a super idea. And I finished the book in 2015, which of course was the anniversary of the rebuilding of City Hall and the building of the ferry building. So that was an apt thing to do. And again, I did a rough sketch, went to bed, got up, looked at the sketch and said to myself, I'm going to do the rough sketch. So much nicer than it all tidied up. So it has tension and linkage and negative space, the three things any design must have. And I thought it would be fun to do the bridge as very rigid and the buildings, all of which you should recognize, as rather looser. And so that book is now in the permanent collection at the special collections at the library. And I also know, as an afternote, that Andrea Grimes there had said that they had wanted for a while to have one of my bindings, but of course they're a public library, they don't have a huge budget. And so this is how they acquired it. So there are so many different ways we get our books into the world, and this is one of the strangest, and in the end, one of the ones I was most grateful to be invited to take part in. Sometimes I make little book arts things, and in 2012, we had our conference in Chester, which is my hometown, pretty much, and 2012 was the anniversary of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. But in Chester, there's this famous clock called the Victoria Clock, because it was put up in 1897 on the Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. So what coincidence is that? So I decided to make this little pop-out. It's just made from black and white card. And everybody who's been to Chester sees this clock. It's the most famous thing in the city. So it pops out like that, and then like that. Super little thing. Of course, I've learned from my mistakes in the past. I made two, so I've got one. And really good fun. And it's embellished with gold. It was bought by my dear friend Maureen Duke, bookbinding teacher, of course. And she came up to me after the auction, because I put it into the auction. And she said, the hands don't go round. And I said to her, look, Maureen, I'm quite good, but I'm not that good. If you want the hands to go round, you need Sean Sheehy. You don't need me. 2015, I was given this book a few years earlier, and I sat on it for a while. It's from Greganog, Gwas Greganog, the great press in Wales. And it's called The Story of Heleth. It's in Welsh and English. And Heleth is a story that's in the Mabinogion, the great Welsh book of sagas, the medieval book. And Heleth is a princess in North Wales somewhere, in one of these little kingdoms, and she refuses to marry the chieftain from the next door tribe. So while her father and brothers are away warring, these people come and they kill everybody in her village and destroy the castle. They have these long-handled swords like pikes. So I thought, okay, I'll build the castle, then I'll break it down as if it's ruined in the dust. And then I did what I do sometimes. I make the title the design. So this is obviously elongated, the story of Heleth. If you're going to do this, it all depends on what's happening around the spine, because it's difficult to tool onto a spine like that. So if the spine can fall in the middle of the title, then it's a go. All done with my little adapted. This is what the inside looks like, and with a suede flyleaf, of course, you get this lovely impression of those marks onto the suede. And these are inlaid pieces of leather. This is a lovely variegated terracotta that I got from Harmattan. They only had a few skins left, and you can see how the tooling works. And this is quite a nice close-up of how the arrowheads are made, and this is a tool I made. So now and again, I'll make a tool, not very often, but simple tools like this I can make when there's no tool in stock available. It's not too difficult to knock one up. And one of the things I loved about this most was doing the box, because I always put something on the front. And quite often I will invent a new typeface. So this typeface is called Heleth. It exists here only, using the same principles of design as went into the binding. This is done for a collector who's got quite a modest but super collection in England. And he was really pleased with this, as I was. Another collector contacted me, and he collects one thing more than anything. It's a bifold, so it's not quite a broadsheet. It's a single piece of paper folded in half, and it's called A Satire Against Mankind by the Earl of Rochester from 16-something. And he collects fine bindings on this one thing. He's obsessed with it. So I had it for a while, and I really struggled because I did not understand the poem at all. It's one of those impenetrable things. So I thought I'll just do something typographic and pretty and striking. So I did this. This is called the Tudor style, invented by Paul Delrue, where you cover the book in overlapping strips of leather, which create these bars going down. Then I chose a typeface that I liked, and this is Optima by Hermann Zapf at 1933, I think, an early typeface of his. Cut them out of leather, laid them on, and then just put lots of gold tooling on it. So once I had the idea, the working out of it with the letters to ensure that every letter was legible. Again, the spine worked for me because I could put a simple letter I on the spine, but nothing else had to touch the spine. So it's always a bit of a luck if you can make this happen. Super project, and he's got, I think, 13 or 14 of these, and we hope that one day he'll have an exhibition of them. But some bindings I do are rather ambitious, and some are extremely simple, not just to execute, but to look at. Oh, back to Man Transformed, and what have we got now? Oh, yeah. In the province of Old Port in the West Indies, there are men that have a square head, so made by art. For they, to bring their children's heads to this fashion, put them between boards when they are new born, which being tender and young are enforced to grow after the form of that square wooden box that encloseth them on every side. Why this book ever went out of print, I don't know. It's just hilarious. I collect books, and I particularly collect unusual books, and I'm always working on a small budget, but I paid a lot of money for this book because I was so bowled over by it. I'm very interested in Carte de Visite albums, as are a lot of people. I've never seen one like this. A customer of mine had it. He just got it in and he was just writing it up actually for his catalogue. And I said, oh gosh, how much are you asking for? Anyway, I decided to buy it. It's a double album, as you can see. And I have shown this image to many, many bookbinders all over the world in talks or just on my phone. I've never met anybody who's noticed one before. So I think it's exceptionally unique and possibly, although it doesn't mean to say that it's worth a lot of money, but it's incredible. And it was made in Hull, in Yorkshire, north of England. And it has this super stand. Most of the photographs are Scottish, however. So it's obviously made there and then for people who eventually ended up in Scotland. But it's mad. And it's in perfect condition, which is another wonderful thing. Now, this is a book from 2016. Now, I have a feeling I might have shown this at book club, but maybe not. It's The Natural History of Selborne, a book that everybody knows. Gilbert White's epistolatory collection, writing to his friend and great mentor, the Earl of Cranbrook. And there's a lot going on in the book. And this is for a collector who has about 12 of my books, and he really likes gold. And I think this is one of the reasons he buys my books, because they always have a lot of gold on them. He appreciates traditional work as well. So the opening of the book is about the felling of a giant oak tree in the center of the village, which I think was dying. But it had 2 ravens nesting in the tree, and they both died. So I've put them back on the cover. It is feathered, back-paired onlays, then inlaid into the leather. And then lots and lots and lots of gold tooling. And again, I had to make a tool for this. I love the circle set, by the way. The circle set, which you can buy as a little set of 4 or 5, are tremendously versatile. And I made 2 little bulrushes, because there's one whole chapter about bulrushes in the book. It's a wonderful book. I really enjoyed reading it. I had never read it, and it's so poetic and gorgeous. And again, the edges is always a field for decoration, where normally we would put gold, but nowadays a lot of us paint our edges. And I really liked how this edge came out. It harmonizes beautifully with the colors on the cover. Now, I haven't really spoken about this much, but every couple of years or so, I get to be one of the lucky 6 people who bind a copy of the shortlisted books for the Booker Prize, the world's most famous fiction prize. So I've done it 5 times now, so I'm just going to quickly show you the 5. The first time I did it was in 2009, and this is the only one I've done which won. So the first time out, I won. And this is called The Finkler Question by Howard Jacobson. He's a well-known English writer and novelist, and he's done a few. He's a comedy writer, basically. And this is a book about a man living in North London who's not Jewish, but all his friends are. And he decides, it's such a bizarre, preposterous story. He decides that he might possibly be Jewish. So the letter J figures a lot, and all his girlfriends have names that begin with the syllable Jew, like June, Julia, Julianne. So the letter F is there because his name is Finkler, and that whole thing is an overriding question. And again, like Thomas the Rhymer, the timing of the book takes place over 4 distinct seasons. So the thing about doing the Booker is you don't have a lot of time. You have about 2 weeks. So you pretty much sit down and come up with a design, and that's your design. So I wanted to do something, again, that was big and bold, and the techniques involved here really served me. So the letter Fs are inlaid. So that means you cut away part of the cover and replace it with another piece of leather. That's quite tricky. The question marks are impressed with sandpaper, and the gold is obviously, it's quite a nice close-up. So when they all overlap like this, it's rather interesting and fun. We couldn't be there because Michael was presenting in Tucson, Arizona that year. So I found out that we had won at about 4 a.m. It was very exciting. The next time I did it was 2011 or 12. Another London Jewish author called Deborah Levy, who's been shortlisted twice more since then, Swimming Home is quite a light-hearted, funny novel about two couples who go on holiday in Provence or Tuscany, one of those places. And they stay in a villa. There's the villa on the left. And there's a pool, and the next day there's a dead body floating in the pool. The murder weapon is not found for a while because it's hiding in plain sight. The owner of the villa collects guns, and the murder weapon is hanging on the wall. So if you look underneath the title and turn your head a little bit, you can see the simplified outline of a gun. And when I gave the book to her, because at the dinner, you meet your author, usually sit with them, and they get given the book and they open it, and then you sit next to them and explain it. I explained that the gun was on the title, and she didn't see it at first. And then when she saw it, she shrieked. So in all the work that we do, this is sometimes, to me, the most pleasurable, because they have no idea they're getting this book, as well as their little check. All the shortlisted get a small amount of money. Got no idea they're getting a book. They've probably never seen a design binding before, and your happy job is to explain to them what it is, and also try to ask them not to touch it because they've just eaten dinner. But anyway, and then for the end, I was really fortunate to find in my scrap bin this piece of tie-dyed leather that served very well for the brackish surface of the pool before it was cleaned. Then in 2013, I got Chigozie Obiama, the fisherman. He's from Nigeria. So he's particularly pleased to know that I'd covered the book in Nigerian goatskin. He didn't know that we mostly use Nigerian goatskin. And this is a book about four brothers, and there's an old madman who's a soothsayer who prophesies that the oldest brother will be killed by the youngest brother. And of course, he is a prophet, and it does come true. But the river runs red, not with the brother's blood, but with the soothsayers, because they go out and kill him. So this is a very simple design. It's the river at night with the blood running through it and the moon glistening on the surface of the water. And notice how the title isn't straight either. It flows in a kind of curve. Again, this is a Tudor style book. It's a super technique which allows a great deal of creative possibility. I've done about 10 or 12 books using this technique, and that's it in its box. And I always put something on the front of the box. So here we've just got a little blood of blood with a line going through it, just to mark that it's the front cover, and also give you a taster of what lies within. Then in 2016, I got Washington Black by Essie Edougian. It's a fabulous story. So it's about a young boy called Washington Black who is a slave on Barbados, and he's rescued by his master's younger brother, who's a secret abolitionist. And they leave Barbados on a balloon, and they get washed up near the coast of Norfolk, Virginia, picked up, go all the way to the Arctic, come back to Nova Scotia, go across to London, go down to Morocco, and end up in Amsterdam, where they set up a botanical gardens. It's a rollickingly good story. So as you can probably see, I've simplified those outlines of the coast, because you don't want everything to be too obvious, because design binding is like poetry. The reader has to be able to join in the puzzle. And then I've impressed some shapes into the leather just to suggest wind, I suppose. And the dots are all the places that they travel to, obviously, and the black dots and the gold dots represent journey. You can see how that works. A combination of tooling and impressing is I now realize becoming a feature of my work. And I, again, doing this in 2 weeks, I had to be able to complete this decoration in a day or so. The edge on the book was one of my favorites, because at one point she describes a broiling sea as they're crossing one of the oceans. And I just did this in about 5 minutes. You've got the cloudy sky and the wild sea. And sometimes when they work well like this, I get really excited. And the other thing I got excited about, because I love word puzzles, is I realized that Washington Black and Essie Edougian give you 25 letters. So I was able to do this. Don't often get a chance to make a spine label for the box, which you notice I covered in iridescent gold. And putting those letters of the title and the author, filling up the grid, but with each letter rotating by a quarter turn of a compass each time. Very excited about that. And then this year, I got Brandon Taylor's beautiful book, Life. If you haven't read it, I really urge you to do so. So it's about a young gay black man from the South who goes to a Midwestern university, works in a lab studying nematodes. You might see nematodes there. And he has a really hard time. He has a hard time fitting in with his condescending, slightly condescending, all white colleagues. He feels lonely and isolated. And I read the book and I really enjoyed it. And then I suddenly had this image of snakes and ladders, which in America I think is called chutes and ladders, because it's a metaphor for real life. By the throw of a dice, you may be lifted up or you may be thrown down. So I created these multicolored onlays. I don't know why I put the grid quite like that. I tooled it in carbon, so you get these lovely dark black lines, but I was pleased that the grid fitted so well with the line going down the spine. Inlaid the shapes, tooled the ladders, some going in, some going under, some going over. And I think it's pretty, and I like pretty things. So this is the first time that they weren't allowed to meet in person. So we watched the ceremony on the BBC, which I think you can still probably watch from America. And it was quite a nice hour-long ceremony, and our books were on display, so everybody got to see them, which was really nice. Oh, we got another installment of Man Transformed here. This is quite good. The mothers of the Huns cut the cheeks of their male children while they still suck, being cruel to them in their cradles, that they might learn to suffer wounds even in their infancy. They are on purpose made most ugly, that you would take them to be the aerial offspring of devils. Right. 2017, we had a second international bookbinding competition, and I bound a book from the Old Style Press again, and it's called White Voices, and it's hard to describe what it is. It's a late medieval folk story written in Latin, and it's about the Children's Crusade. It's been translated more recently into English, and it's a really sad story because this little band of children are wandering all around Central Europe, picking up other children on the way. And when people stop them and say, "Children, where are you going?" They say, "We're going to Jerusalem to take back the Holy Land," because they've heard stories of the Crusaders. And of course, they get to somewhere like somewhere on the south coast of France, Marseille, let's say, and a bunch of kindly Algerian chaps offer to take them across, and of course they're never heard of again. They've sold into slavery, presumably. And for this one, I decided not to try and depict anything about a sea voyage, but just do something that's a little bit tense and a little bit perhaps suggesting of journeys, all of which may not be at all apparent. It's just abstract. But I did use this technique again of making the title part of the design. So if you look beyond the circles and the tool stripes, you can see the two words, White Voices. And again, it was the spine that came to my rescue, because I was able to place a simple I and a simple I on the spine. If it hadn't worked out, I might not have done it, because it's really difficult to tool over a spine successfully. Right, so the next is a book I actually did for my uncle. Now, my uncle is really his family's historian. And this is a book he wrote about the history, 200 or so years of his family history. So in his house, which is quite splendid, he's got a lot of these Victorian oval framed portraits. So that was the first thing. I'll do an oval frame. He plants trees. This is a man who plants trees. He's planted hundreds and hundreds of trees in the grounds of his house in England. And so I made some little leaf shapes and cut them out of card and impressed them into the leather, also on the back, but more subtly. And the rays of gold coming out firstly form a pretty picture, but they also represent the lineage of the various branches of his family. I made 3 copies of this book, one for him and one each for his 2 children. It's lovely to get a commission from a family member, because it shows that they take an interest in what you do. And I actually have bound lots of books for him, because he's got quite quite a super, if not small, library. Now, some of you will remember this from last summer. This is my binding of La Prose Transsibérienne, this incredible project done by Kitty Marriott, printed, of course, by our friend Richard Siebert over in Berkeley. And I can't remember how many bindings she commissioned in the end. Was it 20 or so from bookbinders from all over the world? I'm sure many of you got to see the show last summer in San Francisco, because I do believe it's probably the best show they've ever had there of fine binding. I took a simple approach. I looked at the shapes on the pochoir and I reproduced them in leather. And notice I also did La Prose down the spine in the French fashion with no break between the word la and the word prose, because I thought it would be more interesting if they were equidistant. And there's a close-up. These are back-paired feathered onlays, and I love to tool dotted grids going over leather, so they are both regular and a little freeform at the same time. And of course, this book was all about boxes. So the little white thing down at the bottom is the sort of colophon prospectus, whatever, for the whole thing. And that goes into a little card, yellow card slipcase. That goes into its own slipcase, which is a sort of a slipcase with built-up areas. And then the book that you've just seen goes into its own clamshell box, which goes into its own slipcase. And so both slipcases go into the clamshell box. So this project was more box making than anything else. Anyway, I was delighted to get it done in time. I can't wait to see the show when it makes it here later next year. As Kitty has recently assured us, it will come to London, and it'll be great to see everybody's books again. I was teaching at the Centre for the Book during the week when all the books are arriving, and it was like Christmas every day. Jenny or Nina would open the package, and me and my students would stand at a suitable distance and ooh and ah over every one that came in. There's an incredible collection of books. Oh, this book I did, by the way, for Toby Schwartzberg, who's commissioned a few bindings from me, or bought at least a few bindings from me. So many thanks to Toby for that. And I think our last visit to the land of man transformed is this one. The women of Cumana affect a very long head and face, as accounting it the most comely and beautiful figure of the head, to attain unto which desired deformity, they gently compress the heads of their infants between two little pillows to extend them. What a sweet thought. Now, I'm coming to the end now, and I'm going to round off by just, I mean, there's so many things I could show you because we travel quite a lot and see some beautiful libraries, beautiful bookshops, beautiful tanneries, see some really crazy books. And I will do for the book club sometime a talk about just about the really weird things we've seen as we've traveled around. This is, to my mind, one of the most gorgeous libraries in the world. This is the reading room, the octagonal reading room with viewing galleries of the National Library, the State Library of Victoria in Melbourne. So gorgeous library. They've got a super special collections, and they've got quite a lot of good stuff on show, including this rather poor photograph I took with my phone. That is, of course, the armor of the outlaw / liberator, depending on your point of view, Ned Kelly. Couldn't believe it was there. They've also got his manuscripts, and Ian McEwan's book had just, not Ian McEwan, what's he called? Oh, well, it'll come back to me. True History of the Kelly Gang had just come out, and they had all his manuscripts on which he had based the story on display. I mean, apparently he was quite a brilliant writer for somebody who had no education. During that day, it was incredible. We were treated like royalty. All the curators from special collections, the librarians and the conservators got out their treasures, including several medieval manuscripts, just to show us for about an hour and a half, and then we had lunch. At lunch, I said to my friend Carolyn, not pictured here, but Carolyn Fraser, who learned to print at the Centre for the Book in San Francisco, I said, why didn't you have anything to show, like anything you're working on? She said, I'm not really working on anything at the moment. Oh, she said, I have just done one thing. I made a little box to hold a bullet that they pulled out of Ned Kelly's leg. I said, why didn't you show me that? And I could have got a photograph of it. Anyway, it was too late. The visit was over. So I don't suppose I'll ever get to see the bullet, but it just shows you sometimes we're just making a simple box. We forget why it's interesting. In London now, this is the really tiny bindery at St. Bride. The St. Bride Foundation, or the St. Bride Institute, is right there on Fleet Street. And it used to be a place that trained printing apprentices, but now it's a foundation, it's a library, it's a printing museum. And Designer Bookbinders took over this space about 8 years ago, and we've spent some money buying new equipment and some old equipment, as you can see. It's just got room for about 6 students. We'd like to go somewhere bigger, but this is what we've got. This is where the 6 students stand. And what I particularly want to draw your attention to is the bench dividers, which everybody who visits agree is the best idea they've ever come across. Anybody watching or listening to this talk now who's taken a class at the Centre for the Book will know exactly what I'm talking about. You know those spreaders that you end up sitting next to? Well, they've solved it at a stroke. So I've suggested to Chad dividers in San Francisco. Maybe they'll happen one day. And of course, they've got little dowels on them that go into holes in the bench, so you can remove them if you want to. But they do have this fabulous printing museum, because when printing sort of came to an end on Fleet Street in the 1980s, a lot of people gave their stuff to St. Bride. And of course, this is one of the things they love to say is, printing has not stopped on Fleet Street. We do it here. They've got some gorgeous things. Look at those hemispherical discs on the table. They're great. They come from the newspaper printing industry. So they would use a linotype machine to cast the type. They would then make it into hot metal around this drum. I think I'm getting this right. And then from that, they would cast a soft, when it's wet, it's soft, paper mold from that, which when dried is fitted to the printing press cylinders. And that thing that you're looking at, which is pure newspaper technology, is called a flong. I've no idea why it's called a flong, but so it is. So you get to see great things like that. They're open all the time. You can visit whenever you want. They've got a Heidelberg, they've got an Albion, they've got a Columbia, they've got lots of blocking presses, proofing presses. It's a great place to be. And anybody who watched that program about the Gutenberg press, where they rebuilt Gutenberg's press, I think it was presented by Stephen Fry. If you ever wondered what happened to the press after the program was finished, well, it went here. They bought it for a few pounds. It was like a donation. So that's the Gutenberg press, where the tours all begin. When you're next in Dublin, you must go here. This is the National Printing Museum of, Peter Carey. That is the name of the man who wrote True History of the Kelly Gang. I knew it had come to me. This is the National Printing Museum in Beggars Bush on the outskirts of Dublin. And it's an old barracks, and it's a marvelous, marvelous place. It's probably the best printing museum I've ever been to. I've been to a few. It's got lovely galleried space. It's got lots of information boards. It's got linotype, monotype, Albion, Columbia. It's got every press you can imagine. And we were there on open day, so we got to meet a lot of the old guys who come in to look after the machinery. And I was actually able to look up and see the banner. This is the very famous banner that most bookbinders, some bookbinders know, all bookbinders should. This is the banner dated 1786 or 88 possibly. Bookbinders' traditional trade union handshake. There's Dove of Peace. There's their name, the Bookbinders and Consolidated Union. This banner is from the Dublin branch, because of course then Dublin was part of the United Kingdom. And underneath their motto, united to support, not conspire to injure. And of course, this is a banner that would be carried on May Day. This is a trade union marching banner. And it is hard to believe this, but maybe it was just who I met on the day, but they didn't actually know what the banner was for. And I said, the banner is to celebrate the date of the release from prison of the 4 martyrs, unfortunately one died, who were sent to prison for a year in Newgate in 1786 for having the audacity to go on strike, which was against the law, to demand a reduction of their working day by an hour. So they used to work from 9 in the morning, so 6 in the morning to 9 at night, and they'd like to work for 1 hour less. And it was refused, and they were arrested, and they were sent to prison and released 2 years later. And so June the 28th is the day that bookbinders all over the UK would celebrate with a dinner. In the one I know about is in London. So I've written an article about this strike, and in fact turned it into a talk, which maybe I could give to the book club one day soon. It's a wonderful story, and it was just so great to go to Dublin and find it. So I have time, I now realize, to tell you the story about the banner. One of the old fellas said, you know, the banner came from, let's say, Clark's printing office up on Grafton Street. That's probably not the name, but anyway. And it hung there for decades and decades and decades. And then one day, somebody noticed the banner had gone from the wall. One of these old fellas said at this point, he interjected and he said, yeah, it'll be those banner thieves. They're everywhere. So anyway, 30 some years later, the printing office closes down, and they're moving all the type cabinets, and they find the banner behind the type cabinets just neatly, or, well, perhaps not neatly, but evenly crumpled up. It had fallen off the wall one day, fallen cleanly behind the type cabinets, crumpled up, and nobody ever thought to look behind the banner. At which point one of these guys turned to me and he said, "No, that's Irish." See, they're forever putting themselves down for the sort of incredulity of their behavior. As Irishmen, I can say that. While we were there, they put, now I had this on my wall when I was a student. A lot of people did. It's the Irish Declaration of Independence. It's called Pablach nach Éireann, to the people of Ireland. And it's a if you're not familiar with it, look it up immediately, because in terms of how moving it is, it knocks the socks off the American one. And of course, the English don't even have one, unless you count the Magna Carta. What's really interesting about this is that it is a typographical puzzle. They showed us, well, first of all, at the bottom there are some names. All of those men were executed because printing this banner was an act of high treason, okay? So everybody who printed it, everybody who signed it, and also some of the people who printed it were executed. But they told us that it would almost certainly have been done behind the boss's back, perhaps done at lunchtime or staying late in the evening, and each printer would contribute a small amount, and they would keep it locked up under their workbenches till it was all ready, hastily put it together, run off a few hundred copies, and then redistribute the type so that it couldn't be traced back to them, although obviously it was. But here's what's interesting. The reason they know about this is because if you look closely, you can see that at some point they ran out of E's. So look at the words on the fourth line here: proclaim the Irish Republic as a sovereign independent. So look at the E's in the word sovereign and the word independent. They are clearly, they're a different E from a different font of a different typeface. Now, I mentioned this to Chad Johnson. Everybody knows him, the studio manager at the Centre for the Book. And he, being a printer himself, said, well, there's this expression in the world of printing, which I didn't know, which is before you start a job, you count your E's. So you look at your manuscript and you choose 10 pages at random. You count the E's. You see how many E's you've got in your type drawer, and you figure how much printing you can do before you have to reset. And it's called counting your E's. So I thank Chad for telling me that. But it was Chad who told me, just by glancing over it quickly, that this is probably typeset by 6 men, because there are 6 main paragraphs, all of which start out with E, with proper E's, and all of which run out at some point. So that's a good little bit of detective work. please visit the National Printing Museum when you're in Dublin next. Make a special trip. If you fly to Europe next time, fly via Dublin, have a few days there. There's so much to see, including this. This is their pride and joy. It is their pen ruling machine. Now, you may have seen one at the Bookbinders Museum in San Francisco. The difference between that one and this one is that this one is fully functioning. I don't mean to belittle the one in San Francisco. I know it works, but I don't think every part of it is fully functioning right now. These guys print on this one. So it's an invention from the middle of the 19th century, came from Lancashire. Now, why are we not surprised about that? Because it looks a bit like a loom. And they gave us a demonstration of it. And when I told them that we had this connection to San Francisco, where there's a bookbinders museum and they've got a pen ruling machine that isn't fully working yet, the guy who maintains this machine turned to his friends, there were three of them, and said, "Okay, lads, anybody fancy a free trip to San Francisco?" So they volunteered to come over to get it working. Now, they said it in jest, but it's getting to the point where they're going to have to do it because these machines are exceptionally scarce. There used to be thousands and thousands of them because there was probably as many ruled books as there were printed books at one point in the 19th century. And the very idea now that there's just a handful left, there was one in North London when I was at college. So when we did the account book, we went up to the Holloway Road and we actually fed some of the paper through to rule our own pages for our own account books. But I don't know, I think there was one in Iowa maybe that John Demerit and Nora Powell's used for their book, The Reckoning. Was it in Iowa? I can't remember. But anyway, this one is fully functioning. And if those guys do make it to San Francisco, they'll be doing the world a great service. I've just realized that I've spoken quite a bit about Ireland and I've spoken quite a bit about Wales, which is perhaps not surprising given that these are some of our home nations and both parts of my... And what's not part of my heritage is this. I was in the Czech Republic at a conference and we took a trip after the conference to Vienna and stopped at this place called Horn, which is in Austria, Lower Austria, or is it Upper Austria, and stayed in this monastery overnight where they have a super library and a super collection of artist books. I found in their library a unique artist book from Anna Wolf, which was a delight. Anna Wolf, of course, being a Bay Area book artist. And they got this book out to show us because I have a feeling they show it to everybody who comes through the library. We were there really to visit, but also to consult because they'd got a big grant to set up a Centre for Conservation. As a lot of these things go, they got EU money to set it up. That's a capital grant, but they didn't get any running money. So it's just sitting there idle. It's a tragedy. Anyway, that was part of our visit. They showed us this book, and the story of this book is that this book was found after the war, after the Second World War. And the story goes that towards the end of the Second World War, a group of Russian soldiers was on retreat. Now, my knowledge about the ending of the war is hazy, but they were running away from the Germans, let's say. They got trapped in this village of Horn in a desperately cold winter. And you can imagine they've been marching, boots are worn out. So one of the soldiers finds himself in the library, finds a huge and useful source of leather, so cuts himself 2 new insoles to repair his boots. We loved seeing this book, and the first thing they said was, "No conservation." Well, indeed. Sometimes, because my life is mostly as a restorer and conservator, sometimes we employ the first rule of conservation, which is, if in doubt, do nothing. Our job is to preserve and not to reverse or even sometimes to restore. So this is possibly the most interesting or exciting and sad book I've ever seen. I hope he got home safe. So thank you so much I'm almost on the hour. I'm quite lucky that it turned out well because I didn't practice. Thank you so much for watching. I gathered from Kevin that there's close to 100 people watching. It may be more. I'm not even sure you can get that many people in the book club. So enjoy your glass of wine afterwards and your nibbles. I will go and have mine now. And we miss you all terribly. We adore the book club. It's one of the great institutions in our lives, and the jewel in the crown of the Bay Area. Oh, and so is the Centre for the Book, and so is the Public Library, and so is Mills College, and so is the Gleason Library. You're all lovely, and I will leave you now because there's a rumor going around that it's you're not allowed to say Happy Christmas anymore, so I won't say that. I will leave you with of my ancestors, the Irish ones and the Welsh ones, which is Nolig, Hara, Chwich, and Nadolig Llawen. Thank you, and I'll see you next summer, we hope.
Well, that was something, wasn't it? I don't mean all the technical difficulties at the front end. I mean, once we actually got into the presentation, I know it's not like having Dominic Riley in our club rooms or even live online, but he never fails to impress us all with the artistry of his work and his humor and his wit. And he did it again. So I want to thank everyone for attending this Book Club of California program. If you aren't already a member, please consider joining our century-long tradition of preserving and promoting the history of the book and the book arts. If you are a book club member, I want to thank you for your support. Book club members can enjoy recordings of all of our Zoom webinars, including this one, once I fix the audio at the beginning, in the soon to launch BCC at home portion of the website. This is going to be a new members only benefit where we will offer content online for members who can log in and watch things like all of our pre-recorded webinars. So keep an eye out for the announcement for BCC at home in the weekly programs emails that you are probably receiving from the Book Club of California. And on behalf of the volunteers, the staff, and the members of the book club, I want to wish you all a happy and safe holiday and a joyous new year. We will be back in 2021 with more online programs on all things book related, and I hope that you'll join us. So again, thank you for being with us tonight, for bearing with those technical difficulties at the start of our program. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. We look forward to a new year together. Thank you and good night.